Enciendo el micro. Hola, hola.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start with the press conference before starting with the course directed by Giuseppe Borrell. So this is a press conference, and I just wanted to say good morning to all the media, and of course, warmly welcome Mr. Borrell as well as Cristina. Thank you for joining us one more year. And of course, you have the floor, and then we will have time for questions from the media. Of course, there's many issues that we can address in the circumstances that we live in Europe nowadays, and with the chair of the European Council being held by Spain now, and with everything that is happening in Africa and in general terms with the world situation. Giuseppe, it's a pleasure to have you here. This is your home, so welcome.
Muchas gracias, rector.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your welcome. It's a pleasure to be at the University Menéndez Pelayo once again, following the tradition that we've had for many years, and to go in depth into many of the subjects of interest. And in fact, this year, I believe we have more speakers than ever. We will start with the foreign affairs ministers from Ukraine and other countries. And the events of this summer haven't allowed us to have some of the speakers here. For example, the former President, Mr. Sufu, that cannot leave the country due to the circumstances of his country. But in any case, we will talk about what is happening in Africa and the Sahel area. We will try and go over all the political issues in the world and how they affect us. We will also analyze in detail our relationship with China. That is not a war issue like the others that unfortunately we will be addressing. And also the issue that is always present in this course, that is the response of Europe to the climate crisis, something that has been demonstrated this summer that is happening. So this will be 4.5 days, very intense years. Rector, we always say that we have to be less intense, but we make it more and more intense every year because we cannot limit the amount of subjects that we want to address. I also like to thank the staff of the university, as always, and if you have any questions, any specific questions, I will be here to answer them. Thank you. Good morning. I would like to know about the situation in Ukraine and the agreement to send F-17s. What is the role of Europe in this conflict? Well, there's not an agreement with the EU. The F-16s that are going to be sent to Ukraine are decisions, bilateral decisions made by different countries that have formed a group to coordinate their action. But this is not an agreement with the EU. What we will do will be to help with funding or military funding for Ukraine, and probably those countries will be helped with this funding. But these warplanes won't be able to be used very soon because, first of all, the pilots need to be trained, which takes quite a long time. But the sooner we start, the better. It is true that air support is something that has been demanded by Ukraine for a long time now for several reasons. And as soon as the training of pilots is in place, we hope that they can get that support. But as I said at the beginning of my answer, we are not part of this agreement as the EU. And we're sorry, but we need for everyone to use the microphone if you want interpretation. We are in a situation that will be analyzed in detail throughout the course. We would have the French admiral that up till now was leading the military support to Ukraine, and he will explain what has been done up till now. Every day we see drone attacks over Ukrainian territory and targeting civil society. Once again, yesterday we had an example of an attack to civil structures, also attacks to ports and port structures that should be used to export grain from Ukraine. And the front lines are quite static with small achievements on the one side or the other, but it is an area with mines, so it is very difficult to have a frontal offensive. So all the front is active, but there haven't been any clear breaks in any of the front positions. So it's an artillery war in which Ukraine doesn't have air support nor long-range missiles, which would be necessary to avoid Russia continuing to bomb with no capacity to respond from Ukrainian cities. Beyond the war, we have the attempts to try and achieve a peace. And this is something that we will also be talking about, because many people ask about this, about the peace negotiations. As you know, there are no peace negotiations as such, but there are movements of the international community. The last meeting in Jeddah with more than 40 countries, including China. And this was a step further from Ukraine to get pressure from the international community for the war to stop. But it's only Russia that can stop it. Russia started this war, and they should be the ones to end it. We're also working to have a high-level meeting probably during the United Nations week at the end of September. But the EU will continue to support Ukraine, and in this course we will explain why and how. Mr. Borrell, if it's possible, and I highlight this, if it's possible after 2 years of war, would it be possible to have some kind of a negotiation, like the negotiation of Zapatero and Rubalcaba with the ETA, so that there was a ceasefire? And I say if it's possible, because there will be dead and there will continue to be dead. I really don't see the relationship between the fight against ETA, the terrorist group, and the war between Russia and Ukraine. And we're sorry, but they're not using the microphone now, so we don't get any sound in the interpreter's booth. Sorry for that.
No sé qué decirle, francamente.
I really don't know what to say to that.
Sí, yo quería preguntar.
Good morning. I have a question. Leaving aside the issue of Ukraine, I would like to know if there are other hotspots, other conflicts, Africa, Middle East. I would like to know which other places are a concern for the EU right now. What are the main concerns, and where do you believe new conflicts can arise? So what would be the other concern areas? Well, as we will be explaining throughout the course, there are quite a few, so we don't need more. If you look at the world map, we are surrounded by conflicts. We have, once again, migratory movements in the Atlantic towards the Canary Islands, the situation in Libya, and everything in the Saharan Strip, in the Caucasus and Georgia, the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That is not in the media, but is happening, and also with high levels of victims after the blockage in Azerbaijan. If you look at Sudan, the war continues, even though we forget about it. In Ethiopia, the conflict has changed, but it continues to be present too. And also in our immediate area, we don't need more problems, and I don't think new ones would arise. But I didn't expect a coup in Niger that took place 3 weeks ago, and I didn't expect this summer crisis to be this coup d'etat. We also need to follow closely what is happening in Latin America. 2 important elections took place yesterday, and we have our representative for Latin America that will be talking about this in the discussions. Also, we have to be aware of what has happened in both Guatemala and Ecuador. And Latin America is not a source of interstate conflict, but there is a lot of political movement in Latin America. And even though we won't focus on it in the course, because we did have a specific course on Latin America at the end of June. But let's look at what has happened with the elections in both Guatemala and Ecuador. And once again, bear with us because they are not using the microphone. Niger is Niger. No, es que de repente me he tenido, sí, I just invented that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
How can the elections affect us? We just had a summit with Latin America, and we hadn't had one in a long time, and it was very successful. And in fact, I want to thank our director for Latin America for the work put in place, because we went beyond expectations. Because we thought not everyone was going to come, but almost everyone came, and we were able to reach agreements with the exception of Nicaragua, but we didn't expect them to join any of the agreements in any case. But I believe the relationship is now stronger independently of what happens with the elections, because of course we respect what Latin Americans decide, and there is a left current in Latin America nowadays that continues with the results of these 2 elections. But our wish is for elections to comply with democratic standards, and the result is whatever citizens want. We are specifically concerned about Venezuela, where elections should take place soon, which would be very important for the country and for our relationship with the country, so that we can recognize the results as democratic results.